The smell hit me before I saw the bags. Pine cleaner and plastic in the sun, that sharp, fake bright note of floors scrubbed too hard. The gate rasped in its track when I pushed it, catching for a second like it had a thought about stopping me. On the other side, 8 black contractor bags leaned in a sad, obedient row, knotted tight against the wind. My suitcase bumped my leg. A thin pair of rain-spotted flats, mine, sat perched on top of a bag like a question. And beyond the little path to the porch, my mother stood with her weight in one hip, sunglasses up in her hair, though the light was already turning late. I looked at the doorknob first. New deadbolt, brushed nickel. The old brass one we'd had since I was 12 was gone, leaving a brighter ring where the plate had shielded the paint. The screen door was propped open with the lemon-patterned doorstop I bought her on a whim last spring. The air smelled like someone had mopped with cheap hope. "You took your time," my mother said, not moving. "Your flight landed at 12:07, her voice had that summer gravel to it, a rhythm that said she'd practiced this scene. The phone in my pocket buzzed again, a 3-word text from her I'd seen at the baggage carousel. "Don't make a scene." I counted the bags without trying. 8. I could name what was in them by the weight of the knots. Books, shoes, kitchen. A stack of plates would be that flat-topped one, maybe the blue stoneware I favored. I put my suitcase down on the walkway so gently the wheels barely sighed. "Why are my things in garbage bags at the gate?" I asked. She smiled with no teeth. "You've been saying for months you'd be moving out. This helps." She tipped her chin at the door. "Also keys. In my life, when the floor moves, I look for paper. It's a habit from work and from growing up with a mother who could turn a story in her hands so fast you'd be dizzy." I check the screen. I check the print. I look for stamps and time and signatures. The first thing I saw that wasn't a person or a bag was the white corner of a mailer peeking from one of the black trash bags. It had the shape of a bank envelope, the heavy window, the soft gum lines. Something bank-shaped had made its way into a garbage bag. That was my inciting incident, though I didn't know it yet. I just knew to breathe through my nose because the pine cleaner was trying to make my eyes water and to count. 8 bags, 1 new lock, 12:07, and a mother who had decided the porch was a stage. "I'm not making a scene," I said. "I'm gathering facts. Who I am is simple because I've chosen it to be a deliberate subtraction. At 34, I'm the operations lead at a regional logistics firm in San Luis Obispo. That just means I keep the trucks, the spreadsheets, and the people pointed in the same direction long enough for boxes to turn into money and money to turn into Friday pay. I like proof of things, reconciled ledgers, scanned bills of lading, white tape disappearing along a perfect seam. I am the eldest daughter of a woman who used to tape my name to the lid of every Rubbermaid we stacked in the garage when I was 8. "Label your life and you won't lose it," she'd say, penning Mara in neat block letters on a strip of blue painter's tape. It felt like love then, that insistence on order, on named edges. We bought this house together 2 years ago when interest rates did a small kindness. It was supposed to be a win-win. I put up most of the down payment, $62,000 I had saved without asking anyone for a cent, and we split the mortgage. She had the master. I had the small bedroom with the good morning light and the long hallway to teach me patience. I told myself I'd be here a year, 18 months at the outside, then buy a condo of my own nearer to the office. Meanwhile, I paid, I mowed, I cooked, and I coaxed the fussy water heater back to life with a screwdriver. My name is on the deed next to hers, black on white in the county's font, a line I'd looked at twice a year like a hymn. Vesting information, fee simple. Grantees, Lydia Vale, a single woman, and Mara Vale, an unmarried woman, as joint tenants. I'd missed something. That was clear in the angle of her shoulder and the shine of that new deadbolt. The lever, as I would come to think of it, was paper, thin and heavy enough to bruise. I crouched and untied the bag with the mailer corner peeking out. The smell of old post, ink, paper, the wax of a lipstick that had gotten loose, came up in a sigh. There was the bank window, and behind it, the black typography I know too well. Notice of change. Correspondence. The envelope was addressed to me. My stomach did the small drop that is fear and a better word I hate, recognition. The lever, if you want to be precise, was a $128,000 line of credit that did not belong to me. It had my name on it anyway. You don't see a number like that and think maybe it's a typo. Not when you've lived with numbers as your coworkers. $128,000 is a choice, a precise weight. It's an appraisal minus a cushion. It's a plan with a bright stamp on it. The envelope had a postmark from 4 days ago. Inside, 2 pages. One advising me that my mailing address on file for loan correspondence had been updated to our house, effective immediately. Another welcoming me to an equity line I supposedly consented to electronically per Exhibit A. Exhibit A was where the paper told me a story my mother didn't intend me to read. A print screen of a signature panel, my name typed in a box, the IP address blocky and specific. The timestamp was 12:07 p.m. 3 days ago, the same minute my mother told me my flight had landed today. I had been boarding another plane then, a return from a client audit in Phoenix. There was even a session duration 07:12 detail in the lower corner. 7 minutes and 12 seconds is how long it took some version of me to open a line, consent, and confirm. I hadn't signed anything. But something had. "Did you sign my name?" I asked, still looking down at the paper. She shrugged. "If you loved me, you would have signed. We don't always hear the mask slip while it's happening. Sometimes we think it's wind." I stood up and put the envelope in my tote. The pine cleaner had gone bitter in the heat. I put my hand on the new deadbolt and tried it because sometimes a door is just a door. It was locked. "You changed the locks," I said, in the tone I use at work when a driver tells me he took the long way because it felt right. I told. It's my house now," she said. "I need someone who respects that." "You need $128,000, I said, and watched her flinch just a little, like I'd thrown a very small pebble that still carried weight. The shift had been gradual, as shifts often are when you love someone. Small dots you don't connect until the dotted line becomes a boundary. 2 months ago, a call from the bank I let go to voicemail because I was in a meeting. A month before that, a change of address confirmation email I skimmed on a layover and flagged for later. Last week, a delivery notice from the county recorder's office tucked half under the doormat, the kind of cardboard mailer I mistook for a jury summons. And the quieter things. Mom removing me from the group text with my aunt and cousin saying, "It's just easier for them," when I frowned. The way she'd started calling her new boyfriend Ron, our handyman, as if the presence of a tape measure made him family. Evidence was everywhere when I let my eyes focus. A crumpled receipt from the hardware store showing a lock set bought at 8:32 a.m., a folded printout on the hall console visible through the window, a routing number highlighted in pale yellow. On the fridge, I could see the edge of a paper reminding, "Sign with name as it appears on ID." My life had turned into a collage of clues and highlighter ink. I needed an ally whose loyalty was to paper. That meant calling someone at the bank who heard Exhibit A in the same tone I did. Violation. Her name was Nia Tran. She was not the vice president of anything. She was the junior compliance analyst who called me back at 3:19 p.m. and apologized that she'd kept me waiting 19 minutes. There was a little nervous lift to her words, and it calmed me because nervous people usually care. I sent her the scanned Exhibit A and the address change letter, and I watched in real time as she entered a note on my file. When she came back, on the line, she said the anchor sentence I would think of so often I could write it in the air without a pen. Paper tells the truth when people won't. I could have cried. Instead, I breathed and repeated, "Paper tells the truth." "I've placed an immediate hold on the disbursement," she said, careful with her syllables. "Can you get to a branch today? They'll need to see you in person. Bring ID, anything you have. We can flag the signature. I'm also documenting that your IP address for the last week has been out of state." I said yes. I said yes again, because it felt like a spell. I don't yell. I document. I wrote to myself in my notes app like a dare. There's a glamour to words like freeze and revoke and affidavit if you don't have to be the one to say them into a phone with your mother on the other side of a door. I didn't use any of those words. I just went to the branch. I sat in a glass cube while a manager named Chandra verified my ID against every signature from the last 10 years in a grayscale stack, page after page of me disciplined and me hurried and me trying to keep my line from curling. She said the IP address for the e-consent session originated at this house. That made my scalp get hot, and then too cold like the air had slipped under my hair. She printed a document for me to sign, attesting that I had not signed any e-consent or authorized anyone to open or draw on the line. I signed. Behind glass, a teller looked at me with pity like it was a kind of currency she could count. At 4:42 p.m., with the sun flattening itself in the west, I drove to the county building. I found the clerk who knew me from the permit desk last spring when I'd researched a shed. I paid a fee and recorded a notice that put a public pause on any transactions affecting our title, paper that meant the next move would have another set of eyes. It made me feel less alone than company. I moved through the hour with the feeling of a controlled burn. Quiet, contained, hot enough to shift the landscape. I texted my mother to say I would be home at 6 to collect my things and would be bringing an officer for a civil standby. She didn't reply, but the 3 dots pulsed twice, which told me everything. At 5:54, Nia called to say she had escalated the hold. No funds would be released from the $128,000 line pending a formal fraud review. She sounded relieved, as if this moment was the top of a hill. I pulled up to the house to see my 8 bags remained like a sentence not yet finished. Officer Keene met me at the curb in the kind of quiet way that made you wonder what else he did between calls. He stood about 3 feet back as I knocked. My mother opened the door and gave him the smile she uses on waiters, polite, dismissive, assuming a better table might exist. "She doesn't live here," she said to him, holding up a hand like a stop sign over my face. "She's been out of town for days. Abandoned property." He didn't blink. "Ma'am, her name is on the deed," he said, glancing down at the printout I'd handed him. Paper again, doing the heavy lifting. "This is a civil matter. She can collect her belongings." "Belongings," she said, tasting the word like something acidic. What happened next is not dramatic to retell, and that's part of its power. I loaded the 8 bags into the trunk and the back seat, one by one, each with its particular weight and refusal to fit exactly. The sun had slid, low enough that the yard light flicked on without asking me. Mom said nothing, then said too much. "You owe me for 27 years, she said to my back as I lifted the bag with the books. "I fed you. I kept a roof over your head. You should be grateful I even let your name stay on things this long." "Grateful like grateful?" I said, not turning. "Or grateful like sign here?" "Like sign here," she said before she caught herself. I looked at Officer Keene over the roof of my car, and his eyebrows went up a millimeter like he'd just watched a card slip from a dealer's palm. 37 missed calls. I called none back. I would write that sentence later as if it had happened to someone else in a story. But it happened to me that night and the next morning and into the weekend. Little waves of emergency texts and voicemails and a string of emails that ranged from all caps to lowercase contrition. "It's fine," one said at 1:12 a.m., a time that always makes everything feel less true. "We'll undo it if you would just talk to me," said another at 5:03 a.m. Ron said it's common at 7:34. "I did it for us at 10:11. "I did it because you never will at 12:07 p.m. That number again. Like a private joke the universe insisted on telling me until I told it a better one back. Paper tells the truth when people won't. I printed the emails and set them in a tidy stack on my kitchen counter in the little 1-bedroom I had taken on a month to month, thinking it would be a way station. The cabinets there made that hollow thump when you shut them. Builder. Grade. I was almost grateful for their lack of nostalgia. I made a list of what to bring to the meeting I knew had to happen. ID, the change of address notice, the Exhibit A e-consent screen, a screenshot of my boarding pass from Phoenix, the title, showing our names, the receipt from the hardware store with the timestamp. I added the sentence I wanted to remember to say if I got flustered. "I'm here to resolve a specific set of transactions." We met in our kitchen because I chose the battlefield. The table had a new scratch that wasn't there 2 weeks ago, a long, shallow scar. Ron sat at the end with his hands folded in a way I'm sure he thought conveyed reason but read as rehearsed. My mother wore the sweater she wears to doctor's appointments, soft, gray, and designed to make her look a little smaller. I set the paper down in a stack, squared it with the edge of the table as if measuring mattered to anyone but me. It mattered to me. "Mara," Ron began, leaning forward. We didn't think you'd mind. I mind, I said. I mind that you changed the locks. I mind that you moved my things. I mind the $128,000 line I didn't open, the herky-jerk address change, the forging of my name. It's a list with 4 bullets, and I brought paper for each. I slid the Exhibit A printout across. He didn't touch it. My mother did, with 2 fingers, like it was slightly damp. You would have signed, she said again, quieter, as if repetition might sand the edges off the confession. I didn't, I said, and I won't. Ron tried a different tactic. The one men like him think women like me will respond to because we balance budgets and buy our own wrenches. Look, he said, this is just cash flow. We needed to consolidate. The equity is just sitting there. Equity is not just sitting there, I said. It is ours, not yours, and cash flow belongs to the person whose name is on the draw. I tapped the page. This isn't your name. It isn't mine either. It's an imitation of mine, and it's a crime. There was a flicker then, a small electric blue in the room when we all understood the words that had been hovering. None of us spoke them aloud. I didn't have to. The paper did. Paper tells the truth, I said, mostly to myself. He reached into his back pocket, pulled out a folded document, and tried to turn the scene into a comedy about misunderstanding. We did this officially, he said, unfolding a limited power of attorney form that bore my printed name on the top and a signature at the bottom that looked like mine if you'd only seen it once, on a cake. That's not my signature, I said, and the notary line is blank. It is? He said, and my mother shot him a look that said the word we would all think later. Amateur. I brought someone, I said. And Nia, bless her, knocked on the back door like a friend coming over for coffee. She wasn't there as a savior. She was there as a witness, a person whose daily job made her see lines where other people saw loops. She carried a slim folder and a pen and a breath that didn't tremble. She said hello in the careful way you greet a room that might flip. I'm here in my personal capacity, she said, clearing her throat, as someone who takes paper seriously. My mother laughed, and it sounded like a cough that had been taught to lie. Who is this? A person who will write down what we say, I said. I am not signing anything, my mother said. You already did, I said, and slid the printed emails to her like a deck of cards that always turns up the same face. The one at 12:07 p.m. was on top. This is your admission. These are your words. She put a hand to her mouth and then let it drop. The mask slipped. You owe me for 27 years, she said again, and this time her voice broke on the O. No, I said. I owe the girl who labeled boxes with me, the one who learned to keep her life tidy so it wouldn't get thrown out. I owe her a door that opens with the same key every day. I don't owe an adult who takes advantage of what she taught. Silence sat down with us. I watched the way it made Ron fidget, how it made my mother's sweater climb up her throat like ivy. Nia uncapped her pen. The lamp on the sideboard clicked once as if someone had flipped a switch elsewhere. Here's what happened, in the cleanest language I can give it. We wrote a simple agreement. It contained dates and dollar amounts and the shape of a boundary. Mom agreed to request a full reversal of the $128,000 line, to sign no new documents without my presence, and to return my keys. She acknowledged she had changed the locks and promised to pay for new ones we'd both hold. She agreed to a repayment plan for the $3,400 in closing fees and a $700 courier expense she had triggered, at $200 a month for 22 months with a final balloon to clear the balance at month 23. She initialed every line. We all initialed where we were meant to, and Nia wrote the date in a hand I envied for its clarity. The bank would proceed with the fraud review. A detective from the Financial Crimes Unit would call me the next morning and, after I explained and gave him copies, say the quietest thing I'd ever heard in that tone. You did the right sequence, which felt like a benediction. Quiet is louder in rooms like this, I wrote later in my notebook I keep for the sentences I want to keep. I did not file charges that day. I reserved the right. I learned from the detective that the hold on the $128,000 would harden into a freeze and then, if our evidence stood, into a reversal that would leave a paper trail even Ron would be able to read. The county recorded my notice the same day. Time-stamped 2:58 p.m., and the effect was immediate. A title office called to confirm an ownership query, voice hovering like a bee at a window. Institutions are not saviors. They are engines that move when you feed them the right fuel. Paper is fuel. For days after, the house was the same shape but a different place. I moved out in that precise way I prefer, room by room, labeling again like a mantra. On the third afternoon, when I was boxing my cookbooks, I found an old sticker sheet from the Rubbermaid era, the blue painter's tape we'd used when I was 8. Mara, it said in my mother's steady, younger hand. I pressed the strip onto a fresh box and laughed at the corny poetry of it. I signed nothing. That sentence made my shoulders drop each time I said it. Like an exhale after a long-held yoga pose I was not graceless enough to attempt aloud. The 37 missed calls became 10, then 2. The text tried new costumes. A meme, a Bible verse, a picture of our dog who had died 6 years ago as if grief might act as solvent. I answered none of them. When she did reach me once by blocking her number and calling from a landline, the voice was flat and sullen. "Enjoy your little apartment," she said, and hung up as if my square footage was the injury. In the quiet, I did small things that felt like planting. I changed my own locks with a kit and a YouTube video and the patient help of a neighbor named Alma, who held the flashlight while I lined the plate. I went to the branch when Nia called to say the reversal was complete. She printed a letter on heavy paper and slid it across the desk like it was a prize. "It's done," she said. "Reversed in full." She added in the line I think of, "With gratitude. You did this." "Money has handwriting," I wrote in the margin of the letter. It sounds like a fortune cookie when I say it now. It felt like a rule of physics then. The confrontation did not end with the paper. There was a final kitchen table moment where my mother tried one more time to soften the edges of the thing. "I did it for us," she said, and there was the smallest true thing in it. She wanted to be cared for by the person she taught to care. She had chosen a way that looked like power and read like theft. "We can write a new us," I said, "but it can't be one where I don't exist on paper. The next time we talk about money, we do it at a table with documents, and we do it before, not after. Or we don't do it at all." She stared at the place where our initials made a crooked little triangle on the page. She nodded once and slid the keys across the table in a gesture humbler than any apology she could have formed. The metal clink was a punctuation that kept echoing. "Keys know who they belong to," I wrote on a sticky note and stuck it to my fridge until I stopped needing to look at it. It took 3 weeks for the shape of my life to round out into something that looked like a future again. The $128,000 number stopped waking me at night with the specific panic of an invoice not paid. The 37 missed calls stopped lighting up my lock screen. I walked through a bright one-bedroom condo on a second-floor corner near the bakery that never runs out of sesame loaves, and I stood in the good corner and imagined a couch, a plant, a desk where the afternoon light could make my paper glow. The number attached to it was specific and kind, $180,600, and I could almost do it. I did not pay in cash. That's a myth people tell in stories to make endings sound like clean cuts. I put down what I had. I signed what was mine to sign, and I moved with the careful dignity of someone who knows the weight of a box from the outside. The last time I saw my mother in the house, she was smaller. Not in a cruel way of bones and age, but in the way a person shrinks when the narrative does not fit. She had her sweater in a tote and her mouth set like she'd promised it not to speak anything true. She paused at the door and looked at the lamp we never found a better place for. "Your grandmother hated that lamp," she said, which was our way of being tender while pretending not to be. I folded the restitution schedule into a long rectangle and slid it into a folder in my desk, labeled Home. The numbers came due every month like the tide. She paid on time 6 times, late once, and then, in a final grace I will not explain except to call it relief, she paid the balloon early with the sale of her SUV. We never mentioned the $128,000 again, the way you don't rehash the kind of fever that, once broken, leaves you clear-eyed and hungry. On the day I changed the last lock in the new place, the afternoon smeared itself against the window like butter. The condo smelled like clean drywall, and the first coffee I made in a cheap machine, that warm, paper filter smell that makes a room feel domesticated. I opened a small box I'd labeled with that old blue painter's tape. Mara. The letters. Soft with age. And inside was a single brass key I didn't need anymore. It belonged to the old house, to a door that had been stripped and painted over so many times it had forgotten itself. I set the key on the windowsill and watched the light. Find it. It was still heavy. It was still mine. I don't keep it out as a warning. I keep it as a certificate, a symbol that something that opened one life can be honored in another without using it. Paper tells the truth when people won't. I whispered, and it felt like glass catching the sun. The room was very quiet. Outside, someone pushed a stroller and the wheels hummed over the sidewalk like a song with just the right number of notes. Pull quotes. Paper tells the truth when people won't. I don't yell, I document. 8 bags at the Y. Gate. 1 new lock. $128,000 is a choice, not a typo. 37 missed calls. I called none back. Quiet is louder in rooms like this. I signed nothing. Keys know who they belong to.